Welcome to Movie Friends. My name is Seth. All right, picture this. You're making a movie about a guy without a lot of money who is traveling around LA in search of his crappy car. And then in real life, that car, it breaks down. After you've shot your movie around that car, and by the way, it's not a prop, it's your real life actual car that you use day to day. Today we're talking with Derrick Owens and Mike Koslov. They're the co-directors of Month to Month, a story about an East Coast transplant trying to make his way in LA, sleeping on couches. They made it, themselves being East Coast transplants, while sleeping on couches. Through COVID, with the resources that they had available to them, just like their inspirations, Richard Linklater, Kevin Smith, and Yasujiro Ozu. If you're a filmmaker or want to be one, we hope that you find some inspiration from their story and make something of your own, where you are and with what you have. This is our conversation with Mike and Derrick. We hope you enjoy it.
But yeah, we're excited to talk about your movie Month to Month. It's making its world premiere at Stony Brook Film Festival. Written, directed, edited, you both acted in it, which I think Seth and I don't want to speak for Seth, but we've talked about this before. Like, we're always impressed by how you can do all the things at once.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is wild. And you both acted in it. So I just want to start off with, how did you guys meet?
Yeah, we met at film school when we were both 19 at Syracuse. We were in kind of different film programs at the school. There's kind of one that's a little more industry based, and there's one that's a little more sort of like artistic and sort of classical filmmaking. And so I was in the more sort of communications industry side of the school, and Mike was in the more like artistic side of it. For me, I was always more of like an art film kid, but I sort of ended up in this other school. Like, I didn't know that it existed. And so I ended up meeting Mike and some of the other kids in the film program. And I was kind of just immediately like, I want to be around these kids because I was just like, these kids are like, they're doing the thing. They're out there. They're like shooting films every weekend. They're the ones that are so passionate about just like doing it. And so, at least for me, I always started just like hanging around these kids and sort of being like, okay, can you sort of accept me as like the weird step cousin that like just wants to hang around your school and like be involved in your art films? And so I think that was sort of the first time that we really started meeting, was sort of just like on campus through like campus organizations involving like filmmaking and stuff.
Is this the first time you guys have worked together?
Yeah. So this is the first, I guess, on a larger scale like this.
Yeah.
It's funny because in school we were like definitely friends and close, but it's not like we were working on a bunch of stuff together or anything like that. And to be like honest, it wasn't like, I don't think this is a partnership at the time. I would have been like, oh yeah, we're definitely going to go make a movie together. Like, we're friends, but it definitely didn't feel at the time like that was going to be something. It wasn't until we graduated and like a few years later that like we sort of just met up by chance, I guess, and decided, oh yeah, we should go make something together. So yeah, it's like a weird thing because at the time in school, it definitely wasn't exactly what I thought. Who would I be making a project with? Yeah.
Yeah. So how did the idea for Month to Month come to be? Did one of you have this idea? Did you guys like meet up and were like, hey, I have this idea. Yeah, let's bounce off of that. How can we work together and make this?
Yeah, I mean, it really started as sort of like us having this conversation when we reconnected. That was like our collective dream had been to like make a feature. And Mike had just come off shooting like a really small scale feature. And I'd come off producing one. And so we had sort of like just gotten that bug of like that maybe we could make something at a certain resource level. And so it really just started with us sort of batting back and forth these ideas about like, what kind of movie could we make at our resource level? And then the other sort of connection to it, I really think, came of like, can we try to capture what it's like to be our age right now? Like, can we capture the sort of conversations that we're having with our friends? Like, can we sort of capture sort of the minutia of that, of just like 25-year-olds, a couple years out of school? It was the pandemic. The world felt like it was coming crashing down. And like, could we capture that anxiety or the joy of that, or sort of the multifaceted feeling of sort of being that age? And so it really just started with us on a Google Doc, batting back and forth ideas about like, what kind of things are we talking about now? And of course, that can't be a movie. Like, that's really just the beginning, the starting point of it. But I really think that was kind of the seed of where it started emerging from.
Yeah. We also had the idea of the like car theft. That was also like the initial idea, which actually happened to me at the time, or not at the time, but previously.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so we had that. We had this little idea. And then, as Derek said, we were just like, let's just make a movie about people talking. You know, we love Linklater. We like Kevin Smith. We like these guys. We can do it. We'll just have them ramble about stuff. It's going to be awesome. Everyone's going to love to hear what we have to say. Um, so at one point, we had a document like this like I don't even know, like 10 pages long of just like ideas for conversations. So it'd be like just us being like, you know, a guy in an Uber talking about what he had for breakfast that morning and how that leads him to think that like life is worth living or anything along those lines. So we had a lot of those in this document.
Yeah, you guys mentioned Linklater, and I think you guys are a little bit younger than us. So I'm kind of curious, how did you guys come to Linklater? I know you guys describe this as like an homage to 90s slacker films. So how did you guys come to this type of film in your personal life, just as viewers?
Yeah, I think me and Derek came to it in different ways, which is probably why we're able to connect with it because I think we both have different experiences, but we were both impacted by those films. For me, I'm a Jersey guy, so Clerks was like when I was growing up, I saw this movie and I was like, oh shit, I can go make a movie.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was really inspiring at the time, and I was like 18. I actually had just graduated high school, but I wasn't going to college right away. So it's sort of like nowhere. I was like 18, 19, and I didn't really, I knew what I wanted to do in life with filmmaking, but I didn't have a route to it quite yet. So for me, that movie, I just like immediately was like connected to the subject, the matter, the way he actually went and made it himself. Um, and I like that movie a lot. And I read his book at the time, and he had mentioned Slacker,
Slacker,
Linklater's
yeah.
first film, right? Yeah. His first film was like the reason he made Clerks. So then
Mm-hmm.
I went back and I'm starting to watch all the Linklater films. And for me, it was again seeing this filmmaker with limited resources just going out and making something. And that those two instances really like stuck with me because the movies are great, but how they got made is something that's really, really inspiring. And that's how I came about it. But I do know Derek was not with me when I was 18 at home. So
But I think it's funny that, you know, again, we sort of different life experiences draw us to that like shared love of that content. I know for me, I growing up in Virginia, it wasn't like filmmaking was something that was like omnipresent around me. Like I didn't know anyone that was working in the industry. I didn't know that was something you could do. And so I
Yeah.
always loved film, but I didn't know that that was a career. And so in high school, I thought I was going to be a journalist. So I had I wrote in my school paper for 4 years. I was going to Syracuse as a journalism major. That felt to me like the practical way that you could tell stories, even though it's like funny because journalism is kind of dying as an industry. But for, you know, we had a hometown newspaper. I knew that was a thing. But I had become this like big film buff just throughout my adolescence. And then I remember like I was a big Linklater fan. My dad showed me Dazed and Confused. He was like one of these people that I was like very aware of. And when I was 18 was when Boyhood was coming out. It had like premiered at Sundance and I was following it. And I remember like it was the summer before I went to college and I like convinced my girlfriend at the time to drive 2 hours to Washington, D.C. to watch Boyhood in limited release because I really, really wanted to see it. And I just remember sitting in this packed theater and watching that film. And it really was the film that I think for me, I was like, oh, this is what I would want to make as a film. You know, up until that point, it felt like this thing that I just like loved. But there I was like, oh my God, it's capturing the essence of life. And obviously I was very connected to it because I was essentially watching my childhood play off. That film ends with the kid driving off to college, you know? And so for me, that really put this seed in that's was something I really wanted to do. And then when I think I went to college, I switched my major to film, but I really started getting drawn to like that kind of filmmaking, like specifically that sort of like American independent slice of life kind of stuff. And so really just started drawing me that content, which led to the Kevin Smiths and all these things. And then really, I think that appreciation for like the intention of those kinds of movies, they feel so kind of artistically pure. A lot of those like 90s independent films, they're really just trying to capture the essence, the minutia of how people were living. And so I don't know, maybe we're born too late, but I feel like I always really related to the points of view in those filmmakers and stuff.
Was the plan always to write, direct, edit, and act in this particular film? Like I can't like it's so many hats and it's all so good. So how do you guys come to that decision?
I think the writing and directing part was definitely like immediately we knew we wanted to do that. Initially, we wanted to get this movie done like really fast. So we were like, at the time we had met up in like December of like 2020, and we're like, we're gonna make this movie in like 3 months. It's gonna be awesome. And you know, as the ideas started trickling out, it took a lot. It took more time. I mean, we still got the movie done within a year after having that like initial idea. We still like got
Wow.
it shot. I think writing and directing, we knew we wanted to do. The acting part was a little bit of I was in my first feature film, Friends from Home, which I also acted in, which was these two guys on a road trip where their friendship basically gets tested. But during that filming, it was me and another filmmaker, Joe Blank, and me and him shot and acted in everything. So it was just us two driving cross country doing everything. So I got a little bit more comfortable in front of the camera. And when me and Derrick came about, you know, who we're going to get to be in this movie, we don't have tons of money. We're going to need them to rehearse a lot because that's something me and Derrick really wanted to do. Who do we have for options? And there's not so many people that we can demand, you know, weeks and weeks of rehearsal time with and not give them any money.
Right.
So Derrick saw Friends from Home and he was like, you know what, I think you can do this if you want to give it a shot. Because I also didn't want to like push, hey, I should be in this movie, dude. Like, what are you doing? Let me in it. Let me in it. So that was something we both came to and decided, you know, this is going to make sense. And again, we rehearsed a lot. And all the other actors we could pull in for a day, 2 days because of the way the film's shot, you know, they cycle in and out. And that allowed me too, as an actor who's somebody who, you know, I have experience, but I feel like experience doing projects I've written or projects that I've been a part of creatively from the get-go. So it gave us time to shape that character a lot. So yeah.
Wow.
I always like talking when we talk with filmmakers. I always like asking, you know, as viewers, we see intentionality behind everything, and then it comes down to like, actually, this is what was available this day, or
Yeah.
we didn't have any money, and so now Mike ends up being, you know, the lead in the film. Mike, for you, obviously, you can do a lot of different things. Are you leaning towards acting? Are you leaning towards writing? Do you see it as something that you need to pick between, or something that you can do concurrently?
Well, it's weird because I graduated from Syracuse, primarily focused on cinematography. So I had shot a bunch of thesis films, shot my own film, and directed my own film. I had a strong background in that because I've always loved the technical aspect of filmmaking. And it wasn't until I graduated that I was like, you know what? Like, I do love the camera and being behind it, but I do really want to direct. And for me, that's my focus of where I am with stuff and where I want to continue to grow. Acting for me is something that, like, one, it's extremely difficult and it's really hard. And jumping in front of that camera every day on set was not, you know, I love the experience, but man, is it hard. You're like, if you're in a bad mood, you still have to shoot the scene, and you have to be so open with so many people there, like standing around watching you. As like some guys like fiddling a light, you know, you're like crying. So
Yeah.
it's really, really hard. And I think I love doing it, but I also respect the people who spend a lot more time practicing it and putting effort into it to do these roles outside of themselves. And for me, acting in the future is something I would love to do if the role made sense and I was right for the thing. But I'm not necessarily someone who's, I think, going to be tracking down different types of roles and really trying to expand that type of acting right now, at least. Who knows? I didn't expect to be in this movie, and I was, so anything can happen. But I love the experience, and working with Derrick on that was like great because that was something I was super nervous about. Is, you know, I want to give a good performance, and it's going to be hard for me to judge myself. And Derrick's the guy, you know, I put a lot of like all my trust in, and we had worked on the performances in these rehearsals. But when we got to set, we had talked about it too, where I tried to keep notes, you know, pretty limited to actors because we both were decided that we should really have one voice more or less talking to them. Not that I didn't say anything, but you know, we had worked through this stuff in rehearsals. We knew what we wanted from these performances. So Derrick was there to make sure that that goal was achieved. Or, hey, I know we talked about this in rehearsal, but it's not going the way we thought it was going to. So that was very helpful.
And I think the great thing about working with Mike on this too is like, you know, Zach, he's really the center of the film. You know, he's holding every single scene and he kind of is the tone of the film, kind of like flows through him. And so the beauty of like working with Mike was that like I didn't really have many notes for Mike on set when we were filming, because I think we had worked so long on that character, and Mike obviously understood that character so thoroughly that in a lot of ways it was like, yeah, I just trust the instincts of Mike on the set. We knew this kind of movie that we were making. We had talked about it to death so much going in that like
So much.
I'd say like that stuff was such a the in terms of us figuring out the Zach performance, like it was actually probably one of the lowest things that we had to focus on when it actually came to set, or at least for me, because again, I think like could just trust that we had sort of gotten to that mutual understanding by that point. So that part of it was actually like obviously it's filmmaking, everything is stressful, but that it was nice that we had so much of that mutually understood going into actual production.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely stressing every morning about the lines. But yeah, good to know, Derrick, that you did not think about it. Yeah, that's.
How did it come to casting everyone in this film? Everyone's great. I really, really loved Melissa Juliet Lawson as Peyton.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Amazing. And the two of you on the beach is probably my favorite scene throughout.
Oh.
I watched it 3 times. I'm not going to lie. Like
What?
that particular
That's awesome.
scene.
You're beating my mom right now, so that's good.
No! Yeah, that particular, it spoke to me, and just that conversation, she was wonderful. But also Brian Patterson as Officer John Patrick.
Yeah. A wrecking ball of a human. Yeah.
Maybe John Patrick. His
Argus,
name tag is
right. with him.
Speaking of accidents, sorry to cut you off, but that was a complete accident. You had mentioned this before about things that happened. That Argus name tag, that wasn't supposed to be there. They just delivered the suit, and that's all they had, and we didn't have time to change it. So we just made a joke out of it.
So you just mention it, yeah.
Yeah, but sorry,
Amazing.
Not to cut you off. Please, Michelle.
Not at all. And I don't want to, brush over Peyton, because I do want to go back to that. But with anything with Brian and the scenes, was any of that improv or was that all written?
I would love to say we wrote it all, but a lot of it he brought himself. He has like a long background in improv comedy in Boston. Weirdly enough, I had met him at a camera rental house, like straight out of college. I was there, he was there. We were both, I guess, putting off what we really wanted to do in life and making things work for the time being. So we're at this camera rental house. He actually introduced me to doing improv too. He was like, you need to get on stage and try this out. You're funny. You got to do it. And I took some classes after, like, sort of inspiration from him. And I watched him perform a lot. And oh my God. I mean, the guy is like, especially doing on stage and doing improv is like hilarious. And when me and Derrick came around to this cop character, we wanted to pull him in. And he was actually in Boston. And we didn't have any money. So we were like, hey, we want you in this movie, but we can't fly you out. So it's probably not going to work. But we just wanted to let you know. And then he's like, oh, I'll fly myself out. And we're like, what? So he flew himself out to be in the movie. And then when he came, we rehearsed for like a day and he added so much to the character. I mean, like every take was a little bit different, which was a little hard in editing, but I'd rather have that than not. And I mean, so many of those lines that he brought himself. I mean, we wrote out that character and we thought about it. And I think that helped him too. Like we had a really clear direction of who this guy was, but he like embodied that and then added to it. And that's what we were looking for throughout the whole process. So I don't know, Derrick.
And I'd say with Brian too, like the thing that I think makes him so good is that, the skill of improv, I feel like, especially in comedy, is like essentially keeping the believability of the improv. Like you have some really brilliant comedic actors, but sometimes, especially in a film like this where there's a sort of a reality and a logic that has to stay, sometimes the improv can sort of like escape that. And then you're like, oh, that was so funny, but we can't use that in the film. And with Brian, like, I mean, there was lines we had to cut because there's just like, he would go off on these amazing tangents, but he had such an ability, and I think it's such a skill with improv, to improv within the character, where it always felt true to who this guy was that he had created. Yeah. And so, when we would be doing a scene with Brian, we normally like get the scene and get a few takes. And then we'd always try to leave room at the end for like 2 or 3 takes where we're just letting Brian really just do his thing and kind of cook in the scene. And he had an amazing ability to just, again, do these hilarious lines that you're still like, this is exactly what this guy would say. like he understood the motivation of why he's like making these choices and stuff. And I think just kind of in all of that when we were on the set and then going through all that stuff when we were editing it.
And like acting against that's sort of like a nightmare for me. I'm like sitting there like laughing because I didn't write some of this stuff and it's just popping out. And then I also have to play with it. So I have to like continue so it doesn't just die. I can't just be like, no, I didn't do any of that.
Right.
So I'm sitting there like almost trying to laugh, and all the takes are just him going off and me going like, yeah, oh, okay. Like I'm just sort of like letting him run because he's going. And, you know, there's like a few things we had to cut together because he'd have this amazing thing. And then I'd be sitting there like, I mean, I feel like almost smiling. Like I can see that I want to be laughing.
Yeah.
So he was a lot of that he brought himself. And he, again, super, super funny guy. And just a force of a human too.
How did you come across Melissa for Peyton?
Melissa's like, she's a good friend of ours from college. She was actually at Syracuse our same year. She was in the theater program, and Syracuse is a great theater program, but a lot of the actors sort of stay in theater. They go to New York, and Melissa was one of the few that really wanted to do film acting. And so she was out in LA with us. And to be honest, she was like probably the first or one of the first people that popped into mind when we were even coming up with the script of people that we wanted to cast, because I'd worked with Melissa on a short film a couple years ago and had an amazing experience with her. You know, we had seen her in a lot of our friends' work and stuff. And so, you know, she was really like, I mean, we had a table read when we were like in the process of doing the script, and we gave her a couple roles, but one of the main roles was that Peyton role. And I think that scene, as you said, there's so much, I mean, it's just those two characters for a really extended period. And, you know, it's a hard scene to pull off. I think we knew it was going to be challenging. And she has such a naturalism to the way that she's able to sort of act and perform and sort of like be in a scene and in the moment that, you know, I think we were just like incredibly lucky to have her. And so, you know, again, I think was literally the first person we signed on in the movie. We're just like, we need you in this film.
Yeah, and that's like so many of the characters, the people in these movies are people we knew and were friends with or were friends of friends. I mean, and just to speak to Melissa a little bit more, she acting wise, everybody was like wonderful to act against, but she's like a prime example of like, man, my performance, I felt so much better about myself acting when it was like in scenes with these folks. And Melissa's like such a great example where like it ends, I'm like, I really crushed it. You know, like I really did good. And then like I'm, you know, we're driving home and I'm thinking to myself like, well, she did really good. And you know, I felt really good, but she, like these actors like helped me be better.
Yeah.
And she was so good at that, where like, I was like, oh man, I'm killing it, you know? So yeah, she was, oh my gosh. Yeah. Wonderful. And I think we're so lucky to have friends that we've either graduated with or have met out here, that are talented and good at what they do. And like these people who I imagine in the next 5 to 10 years are going to be onto some bigger things too. And it was really special working with them because they gave us so much time. We rehearsed with them. They showed up on set, and they crushed it. Everybody knew their lines. We didn't have any issues with like, you know, with that. So it was very exciting.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, everybody was awesome, and everybody had such a specific role, which I love. Like the cast of characters you brought together, the Uber driver. You're just that familiarity of having a group of friends who plays Catan every night. Like that's there's a comfort in that, and there's a beauty in that routine, even if you feel like, wow, I'm going nowhere.
Yeah, I mean that's something again. I think the balance we were trying to strike between let's make a movie about people chatting about what it's like to be 25, and then let's make a movie about that same thing but with a little bit of direction, was sort of where we ended up. So we wanted to show those slice of life moments, the friends playing Catan or hanging out on the couch or just like buying beer or whatever those little moments were. And then for us, we were like, well, we do have to have some stakes. But I mean, those Catan scenes were my favorite, like some of my favorite in the whole movie, just acting in and making as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was such a fun, that grouping of those friends was like, I mean, because we rehearsed with them collectively beforehand. We knew Jasmine, who plays Maya from college. She was a fellow filmmaker of ours.
She's so good, right?
She's so good. And she was one of the people when we were casting that, she had acted in like short student films that we had seen her in. But really she had sort of a really engaging, like social media YouTube presence. She wasn't like an influencer, just like the sort of that she'd make these like funny videos where she'd like do impressions of people in our film program and stuff. It was just so good. And so, we didn't even know that she'd have an interest in acting in our film. We were just like, this is someone that just like has such a distinct personality and the way that they carry themselves. That being able to bring her in was just awesome because again, there was like natural chemistry with the friend group where like Jasmine and Mike had already known each other. Like, it feel like, and Will, they knew Will too, because Will, who plays Tommy, also went to film school with us. And so like we'd had these friendships that, had sort of existed over time. And so I think when it came to sort of trying to capture the warmth of those friendships, which I think was so key to the movie, a lot of that stuff was sort of already built in. Which I just think was made it so much fun to film, and I hopefully some of that energy like comes through, in the film itself because we were really really trying to channel that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It comes through with a genuine feel to it. I feel, and I know you guys like. I know this is showing 25-year-olds, but like how am I 37? I think once you get in your 30s, you forget how old you are. But I felt like I still have these conversations with my group of friends of just like, what is happiness? Is anybody happy? I feel like I'm still waiting to grow up. Like, and the part of just the conversation of like, yeah, I got this job. Peyton talking about, I got this job. It's a non-for-profit, but it's got benefits. So it's like, we're trying to achieve that level. It's so really relatable.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about, there's a particular quote that Peyton talks about of wherever you go, there you are. How did you come across that quote?
That's something my dad would always say. I know it's also like a book, I guess we did some research into, and there's a little bit more of a backstory there, I guess, with where like its origins. But when I was growing up, my dad would always say that. I think he was quoting a song that he loved, but it's something that's always stuck in my head because at the end of the day, it's us. No matter where we go, as lame as it sounds, there you are. And that was something we were trying to slip in these little moments, these little things that I think have impacted us in our own lives into these characters without it being like overly sentimental, without spelling out a message. And every character sort of brings their own unique message, which is something that was important for us. This movie isn't about one message. It's about different characters giving you different messages and different things that they believe true to be in life. But that quote, my dad just said it a lot growing up, and it's stuck with me, and I like it. Yeah. But it's also a book, which I did not know. It's like a self-help
I took
book.
it from the great Peter Weller film, Buckaroo Banzai and the Adventures Across the
You know what?
Dimension.
I think that is where my dad. I think that's where my dad took it from.
Hey, you've got a cool dad then, if that's where it comes
Yeah,
from.
I actually haven't seen that movie. It was on the plane ride over. It was one that popped up that I've been trying to. So
I recommend it. Highly recommend it. It's a great weirdo film. Great weirdo performance from John Lithgow too.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
Do you guys live on the West Coast now? Is that where you're based?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're both in
So okay, might be like a weird question, and maybe because of your industry you're in that made you guys go to the West Coast. But growing up as a teenager, I grew up in the Laguna Beach OC era, right? And like this is just what I was fascinated with, surf culture too, of just like I gotta go out west. Was it the same thing for you guys growing up on the East Coast of like this lure of California? I gotta go out west. I mean, I never went. I stayed. I'm still here.
Yeah.
Now as I've gotten older, I plan on staying here. But was that something that you guys were drawn to? Or is this just my generation?
No, I mean, I don't want to speak for Mike. Mike, I'm sure Mike has his own feelings with it. I feel like as filmmakers, and it's not true, but I think there is something about like, you kind of have to check it off the list of having gone to LA. Cause that's where so many of your idols have like passed through, that's where so much history and film has been made. And so I think there's a real allure to it in that sense. I think when it really came down to it, it took me a while to get out to LA. Mike's been out there a little bit longer than me. It really was the community that brought me out there. We had a big group of ours. I lived in New York for a couple years. Like I didn't make that jump right away, but we had a really great group of people that were out there that were people that were essential in making this movie that lived out there. And so for me, it was like, as a filmmaker trying to do things, especially on a lower budget with limited resources, having that group of people, those like artisans that are also friends in a place, made it sort of like a no-brainer, as in like there's really no other place that we could make film on the level that we are at, that is in LA. So that was really my calling to there. But I think as a kid, I said it wasn't really even on my radar, like film as a thing. And so it really was only until I got older that it became this sort of realistic thing that, maybe could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had this like Lego playset that was like there's like a little camera with it. And then like it was like a Spielberg movie set. And I think it came with a video game where you could like go into this movie studio. And that was something that like weirdly had this effect on me where like I wanted to go wherever that was. Like this video game was like real. Um and so for me, it was growing up in New Jersey, like which I loved. I had like a really great childhood, and a lot of support there. But there was just no way to make movies. And I'd stayed a year after graduating too, and like I was trying to do stuff then, and it was just hard to connect all the dots. How do I get a sound person? How do I get these things? Like the little minutia of it all was like hard. And then going to film school and having this idea in the back of my head, like I want to go to LA one day. Like it's just sunny there. It's just
Yeah.
they make movies there. I want to go do that.
Yeah.
And I don't think I had that same surfer draw to it, but I did have the idea of like, oh, like it's happening over there, and I think that's what took me to that place. And it's true. Like you get here and like everybody, like literally everybody is somehow connected to the movies, and it's daunting, but it's also like exciting. And I think like Derrick said, the bigger thing and the thing that's kept me out here is friends. It's the people we made this movie with and the people we continue to make stuff with. It's like the only reason I think I'd really want to move anywhere, and it's harder to leave a place now is because the people here are just like we've met some amazing people. Our friends have moved out here. We've built this community, and it's hard to go back to somewhere where that's not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So is month to month going to be at future festivals coming up? What's the plan?
Hopefully, none to announce right now. And Stony Brook's like I think the thing we're looking forward to. I was here last year with friends from home, my first feature film, and
Nice.
yeah, and it was like I mean, this experience at this festival was like unparalleled. The amount of care they took and detail they had, and just hospitality they gave, and exposure to your film. You have like all these people watching there. We didn't have to promote it. I've been to festivals where you show up and there's like, I'm not joking, like two other people, and
Sure.
it's not even a movie theater. It's like a cafe,
Yeah.
and you're watching it, and like people are like, they look over, like, oh, that guy's in the movie. Like, so to be at a place, and there's a purpose for like a lot of those festivals and everything, but this one especially is just so well organized, and it really makes it's a great place for us to launch this film.
Going back to the idea of, Michelle and I are East Coast people, I think kind of through and through. My favorite description of an East Coast person is angry for no reason, just like your default is like upset. And then,
Yeah.
you go throughout your day, and if something bad happens, you just get more upset. Or if something good happens, you get a little less upset, but you're kind of
Yeah.
stuck there. And my experience with West Coast people is like the opposite. Like the default is like, what? Everything's cool. It's sunny all the time. Why would it be upset? But throughout your film, and I don't want to give anything away because I think that it's a movie that takes you on a journey with your own place in life. Obviously, we've mentioned Slacker and Clerks and Linklater. And so it's not so much about what happens, but how the people react to and philosophize on what is happening, right? But for me, watching it, there were so many references to East Coast sports teams.
Yeah.
The feeling of making a mistake, of moving out to LA. You have the character who's like, "I just got here. How can you be leaving?" So I'm curious how much of that was autobiographical, how much of that was working out your frustrations of making a film through the pandemic, and your own feelings of being an East Coast person on the West Coast.
Yeah, I'd say for me coming from there, and I think Mike shares this feeling a little bit too, is like so much of our community out there are East Coast transplants. And I think that's just the nature of LA in general. It's bringing in people from all over the world, all over the country who are sort of pursuing this thing. chasing this very unique opportunity that I think exists very specifically there. And so you have all these different groups coming from all over. And I think in a weird way, it makes you think a little bit more about what you said, like that East Coast culture. When you're there, when you're seeing it surrounded by West Coast culture. I know when I first went out there, I worked an internship in college, and it was a bit of a culture shock, like a real culture shock that I don't think I was expecting. And it makes sense. I mean, it's forming 3,000 miles away. Like there's a lot of differences that happen there. And so I think for us, it's a lot of like that processing, that feeling of making this big leap, this big move where you're moving away from your family, you're moving away from really the culture that you grew up in, and you're trying to sort of like keep some of it because you know just inherently by moving to a new place with a different culture, it's going to change you a little bit. You're going to adjust to that place around you, but you're also sort of holding on to a lot of where you came from and at the same way. And so I think that's a lot of at least the feelings that I had, and I think Mike maybe shared, of like coming to LA, especially those first few years. I mean, for a lifetime, but especially at first, you're really sort of in this limbo state of sort of still being like of these two worlds and stuff like that. And so I think it was a little bit of trying to process, at least personally, that emotion of adjusting to a new world like that, and really asking that question of like, is it worth it? Like making this big move out here that is going to ultimately have an effect, you know, on who you are and sort of like, you know, your future moving forward and your personality.
Right.
Definitely with Zach as a character, and I think me personally, like the anger thing of the East Coast is something I still unfortunately have. You know, I think what the West Coast has taught me is while I'm standing in line for groceries and like, what is this? Why is this line here? Like, open up another register. That's like the East Coast of me. And the West Coast is just like, hey man, they're people. Like everyone's trying. It's going to be good. So like that's sort of like that's like all day in traffic, getting gas, whatever it is. I'm like, I got this East Coast first mentality, which like, you know, is there. And then like the West Coast just to cover it up. And sometimes like it like comes out if I'm playing sports. Like if I played kickball recently with a bunch of people and I got really into it.
Yeah.
And people are like, you seemed angry. I was like, I was just having fun.
Yeah.
This is just having fun. I'm
That's all
yelling
I
because
know.
it's
That's all I
good.
know.
Yeah. No, yell at me. Go ahead. This is not. I don't take offense to it.
Yep.
So I still very much carry that. And I think Zach does too in the movie, where it's like he's frustrated by these things and he's like, you know, kicking things and cursing and like mad, but he cares about people and he wants them to like be okay. And that's something I think, you know, I mean, both being East Coasters is something that like is connected to that. Yeah. Hopefully the movie embodies that a bit, you know, because you can't forget about the East Coast.
Absolutely. It's funny how the story of America just continues to repeat, and your guys' film is a very, very American film. You know,
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of years ago, people were all gathered here on the East Coast, and then you headed out to California because there was gold or there was opportunity, there was wide open spaces. And it's the same exact thing now, right? You go out to California because there might be gold in the Hollywood Hills.
Yeah.
There might be fame and riches. And it's funny, you know, the stakes are a little lower. You're not going to, you know, get ambushed in your wagon train, or you might not starve to death because you planted the wrong thing.
And it takes 6 hours.
Right. You might have to, you know, come back home with your tail tucked between your legs saying like, oh, I tried this thing and it didn't quite work. But there's still this idea of going from one place to another. And something that I thought you guys captured and updated a bit, and not to continue to compare your film to all the ones that we've already done, but where your movie, I thought, really successfully updates the 90s slacker thing is you really fill this out with gig culture, and also how like the systems that are supposed to protect us now are just completely indifferent to one person's suffering. When you were doing when you were doing the call on the automated menu, my blood pressure literally I almost, and I never do this, I almost was like, can I fast forward?
Yeah.
Because it was so accurate. And as someone who has to make a lot of phone calls to automated systems, that was spot on. But also, we already mentioned, you know, the police officer who is so funny. And I appreciated how you guys strike that balance, because if he wasn't funny, it would be another instance that's just so maddening. But you guys really brought out again how in this pursuit of not being evil or being selfish, it's just like, hey, I'm trying to follow my passion, and these systems are not helping me out.
Mm-hmm.
I was also curious if there was any kind of autobiographical aspects to. I mean, I know you already mentioned your car had been stolen.
Well,
but
yeah.
walking
So-
dogs, and you guys don't have money to make this movie. How are you kind of
Yeah.
surviving?
Yeah, we didn't have money to make the movie too. Luckily, a lot of people helped us. But the car aspect is like, I mean, a lot of that's just like true and pretty close to like 100% true. When I was
Yeah.
18, my car was stolen. Just I was in, or 18 or 19, I was seeing Captain Phillips, which is like
Sure.
ironic because like it's like a hijacking movie, and I came out and my
Yes.
car was gone,
Yes.
and it was so frustrating because like, okay, one, I'm tearing up because the end of that movie made me cry, and I'm coming
Yeah.
out and like my car's gone, so I'm emotionally just open. I'm ready to like get hit again and not take it well. And I call the police, and their first response to all of this is like, "Are you sure that's where you parked it?"
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure." And then when the guy shows up, I mean, he did what that guy did. He was like, "Are you sure it's stolen?"
Yeah.
And then he got upset. Like, I still remember, he's like, "Dude, I've been dealing with this like all day. Like, it's like the
Yeah.
third car that's been stolen." Like, he's going off about how frustrated he is about his job. And I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't have the car."
Right.
And
right.
so that part's true. And then the part where they just didn't input it into the system. So like 2 days had passed, and I actually had a speeding ticket in Pennsylvania, and I call up this judge, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm so sorry, I can't come to this to the court date because I don't have a car." And he's like, "What happened?" And I'm like, "It got stolen." And that office looks up the car, and they go, "It's not reported as stolen." And I was like, "What?" So then I call
Oh
the
my
police, and the police go, "Hey, what's going on?" And I was like, "My car, I don't think it's reported as stolen." And they go, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, it's not. We'll take care of that now." And
Oh
yeah,
my
and
gosh.
then they were like over the phone, they're telling me like we should be good now. And the car popped up the next day, smashed up. All my stuff were stolen. They had put like a siren inside of my car to get away with it. So that's all true. We picked it up in some
Wow.
warehouse. That was true.
Wow.
And the guy just running away was also true. He didn't die, but at the time they told me the guys who had stolen the car had driven it away, popped up on some curb, popped out, and just walked, and thought they could blend in. And then they got caught, obviously. No one died. But I remember being like, "So what do I do? How do I like get my car back?" And they were like, I mean, they pretty much were like, "There's, these people, you can't sue them really because they don't have anything." And, I understand that too, but also I'm not coming from a place where I can financially afford fixing this car myself. It was like my only way around. I'm 19 at the time. And like I said, I was in between college and high school. I was like lost in life. And then my car gets stolen, and I was like, I mean, I was a wreck. So that event and a lot of the stuff that happened there is true. And I didn't have insurance. The whole incidental thing is true too, where it's like a $50 difference a month, but I just didn't have it. And they
Wow.
don't care. It's over. You're paying all this money a month, but you didn't spend the extra $10 it is for this one box you didn't check.
Right. Right.
So that was a really, really hard time in my life, and that's something I've kept with me. And I remember telling Derrick this story too, and that's like the basis to the movie. That's like the bones of the structure.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's all true, and I think that's why it resonates too. And it's one of the most frustrating little like events in my life. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not the biggest deal in the world, and there's a lot harder stuff in life. But at the time, you know, the perspective of it was, oh my God, my life's like over. So
Right. Right.
it was hard. I mean, I was a pizza delivery driver at the time, and I lost my job. Like I
Oh
couldn't do my
no.
job. I had to go in. I remember. I mean, I didn't love the job, but I went in and I was like, "Hey, I'm quitting." And they were like, "What?" And I was like, "My car was stolen." They were like, "Okay."
Right.
That was it. So it upended my life quite dramatically.
Holy moly.
And I think just to to sort of touch on like Mike's story about the car and how it relates to, I think some of the stuff you're talking about of like the gig economy stuff, I think that we were thinking about was like, as an outsider moving to LA, someone that maybe doesn't have a lot of connections to the city or comes from like maybe a really like a high wealth background or something, like it's a really expensive place to live and you're kind of immediately on the fringes. And I think that was sort of something we were trying to capture, was like, what is it like to live in somewhere like LA, which has this sort of glitz and glamour image? But the reality is it's like millions of people living on the edge, you know,
dirty.
and that's really, really what Zach is like. He's not living in Hollywood. He's living in the Valley, you know, and he's living on a friend's couch. He's struggling to find employment. It's really competitive. You know, it's like, and his car is really like the last thing he kind of has, you know, and so like there is this thing, we didn't want the whole movie to be completely focused on that, but we did want that to be kind of like an undercurrent that like, you know, your car is like kind of what you have, you know, and really like you're kind of have to debate giving up your quote unquote dreams when you lose on these, like, you know, that line between staying and going is really thin for like a lot of people, you know, and obviously like for
really
LA,
is.
there's an even like broader, you know, a lot of people being homeless and how thin that line is as well. And Zach is privileged enough to have a family back on the East Coast, but I think we're really trying to capture just that day-to-day anxiety that I think a lot of young people moving to somewhere like LA have, where you're just like, man, I got like $1,000 in my bank account or maybe less than that. And like, I got my car. And if those things were to go, which can happen in a heartbeat, I'm really out on a line, you know, and I really don't know what I'm going to do.
Well, it's funny too, because like we made this movie and then we sort of like, for a brief time, we became this movie. Like this movie, like was really like financially, we poured a lot into it, right? And we were able to raise a lot of money and get a lot of people behind us to help us do that. But we also had to put ourselves out there a lot, you know? And the movie ends and we're both like, I mean, I'm swiping my credit card left and right. And I'm looking back at the movie like, oh shit, I'm like, maybe I'm going to be on a couch soon.
And I was literally on Mike's couch.
Yeah, he was
during the making of the movie. Like I was living at Mike's apartment on his couch. So like we were. There was a bit of art imitating life, and Mike had a stint on couch. Like it's just, I think it's a rite of passage in LA. You know, at a certain point where you know you have to do it.
Yeah, a lot of people come through and they're just like, "Hey, can I crash on your couch for like a week or two or like a month or so?" And you're like, "Okay," and you just you know, but you know it's like hard, especially. I mean. Derrick and I both, we moved out to the city without jobs and without like places to live. And my brother, like a few years ago, who's like a doctor, he was like, yeah, I was telling somebody how you just moved to the city without a job or a place to live. Like that's crazy. And I never had thought about it like that because I was like, well, that's what you do. And in LA, it's not that weird. It's what a lot of people do. You know, that's also what Zach's doing. And he's debating, maybe I should just call it quits. This is getting hard.
And like I said, it's really an American thing to just you head out. You don't know anybody, but you know yourself. You know what you can handle. You know what you can. You know what you're capable of. You know, and I think at a certain point, you just have to believe either in an incredible amount of luck or you're foolish enough to believe that your dream is worth chasing. So.
You definitely have to be a little dumb. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything. Entrepreneur, starting anything. You have to turn off this switch that is in most people's brain that says, I'm not going to make a movie. I can't have someone fly out from Boston. I can't ask all my friends, for all the reasons, you think it's going to suck or you think no one will care. You have to turn off all of those things and just do it. And it's the people who can do that who get things done.
Well, and it was scary. I mean, we were shooting during COVID too. So it's like,
that's crazy.
At the tail end of that, it's like, will the production be shut down? And, we're paying all of our friends, but we're not paying them enough. So we're worried, are these people going to flake? Are these actors, they want to do it, but are they the right? Like, there's so many moments where me and Derrick just were like struggling to get this thing done. But yeah, I think we were both just so dedicated to trying to make it happen because we had, I mean, that's what we set out to do and we were going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we know from film history, if you want to look at things are not working out, you don't have to look further than Jaws, going double its schedule, double its budget. No, your main thing is flopping around in the water, not working.
Yeah.
But
Derrick
you
kept
know,
calling me the shark. He's like, "You're just like the shark. We just can't show you that much. We're
Well,
gonna
I
just do it
kind of
all
think
from your POV."
right,
I
yeah.
kind of think like Mike's car was kind of our Jaws shark because
Mm.
even though the car is kind of, you know, Mike still has that car, which is
I still
amazing because
have it.
that
Yeah.
car it
Still
keeps
use it.
running.
Amazing.
But
Won't
it
die.
literally it broke down like during the middle of
Oh.
shooting, and it was one of the most stressful days because luckily the car it's only really at the beginning and end of the movie, but
Mhm.
it's pretty like necessary, and so we hadn't shot the end scenes of the movie yet. And Mike's car broke down in the middle of shooting. And I remember he called me and was like, "Hey, my car's broken down." And so we went, our DP, me and Mike, and we like were able to
Pushed.
literally push this
Yeah,
car
we
into
pushed
like
it.
an auto shop.
Just the closest one, hoping it's gonna work. And in LA, there's like a million, and a lot of them, they're not all good.
Right.
But yeah, we just pushed it. Just pushed that car right in. Sorry, Derek.
Amazing.
No, and it was kind of like, all right, hopefully this guy can fix it in the 3 days that it needs. We got to get this car from the valley to downtown to this warehouse so that we can film it, and it was like added a little bit of not that we needed it, but added a little bit of added stakes to everything while we were shooting that last week of like, is this car going to get finished?
And then I think he fixed it, but the AC wasn't hooked up after. So like when we had it, it was like hot. It was just hot in the car. So it was like all these little, it's my car, right? And we're filming it. It's our budget. It's our money. And we're filming it. And I'm like sitting there with like an actress just like, yeah, sorry, the heat, we can't have it on. Or the AC, it's the audio. We got to make sure we can't have it too loud. We'll just roll down the windows a little, Yeah, and it was, I remember calling that guy. Like I'm like doing a take, and then we're at this park, and I'm like, hey, like, is the car gonna get done? And like I'm going back and forth with this guy as we're like doing takes of like, I need it tomorrow. And he's like, $600. I'm like, whatever, we'll just do it. We need it. Whatever it is, please get it done. I'm like trying to explain to him that's gonna be in a movie. I'm like,
Right,
it's really, really important we get that thing.
Right.
But yeah, that was weird. And it's when we were making this thing too, just to build off that a little, like, this is all we did. So like, me and Derrick are just like constantly grinding on this thing, and the car breaking down is just like, oh geez, how are we gonna get through this?
Yeah, that just adds fuel to your fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a little stress.
Absolutely.
And maybe it plays in the
sure.
performance.
Right.
Maybe Derrick, did you
yeah.
break it to get me? Was that like a
Yeah,
character thing?
I went in. Yeah, exactly. The motivation worked
yeah.
perfectly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we need more emotion. We'll break
That's
the
right.
car.
Yeah.
That's right.
But there were just so many serendipitous things like that just like, I think happened, but somehow helped us in a way.
Yeah.
That's like hard to explain. I mean, we had a COVID scare for like a few days where someone on set had gotten it, and we had to shut down our set and get everyone tested. And we had to like move around days, but that actually ended up being like beneficial to us in the end. Yeah. And it's just so many things like that just, I think we turned them into positives too, and something we tried to keep, but it was really, we were very fortunate with a lot of the stuff that happened.
Yeah. I think sometimes people can be afraid too because they don't quite understand the editing process, that so many things can completely change and be moved around, and so much stuff gets fixed. But you have to do it first. You have to get the material that can then be put together, and sometimes you just gotta just do it, and like we mentioned from Clerks, there's some iconic stuff from that film that was just, we're filming throughout the night, so now the windows don't open or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
You can look at things as a limitation, and again, it will stop you, but if you just push through, in the end you'll be able to put it together. But you got to start first.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's something too I think Derrick really preached as well. Like while we were writing the script, this is something I think obviously I wanted to do, but I think he pushed it for more of like us just analyzing every single line and going through every piece of it, and like, at a point we're like arguing about like, should this word be like, like specifically like taken, or should he get it? Should it be taken or get it? Like that's like where we're at with that level of detail of just like critiquing the script itself, so that when we got into these situations we could just like flow with it. Like we had such a clear idea of what we wanted that like when stuff popped up like that, it was almost easier because we knew already the one side of it, and making an adjustment wasn't too hard. But actually our first day too, just as like another side note, we like almost didn't have the first location, right? Derek, do you remember this? We were like shooting.
Oh yes, the coffee
We were
shop.
shooting at a coffee
Yeah.
shop, and like we had went in there, and like we like paid them, and or we like had set up to pay them, and they're like, "Can you just pay us the day of?" I'm like, okay. And then like the day of, it's like they I guess there's just some miscommunication on our end or whatever it was, and something we were learning as like I guess producers at the time. But they're like, "Oh, we actually want this much," and it was more than what we originally said. And then we were like, "Oh no, what do we do?" And that's like day one. This is day one, like an hour before shooting. Like we're showing up there. And they were great in the end and everything else. And again, I think it's more me and Derek sort of not, getting better at communicating and making sure everything's set in stone. But that was just another thing of like, oh my God, what if this doesn't work?
Right.
What if day one's canceled?
And it's a good point where like I think with when me and Mike were writing it, we were trying to be very conscious of like budget, what we had access to, actors, all that stuff. But the one thing that we didn't adhere to like an indie sort of thinking was like locations. We wrote like 20 locations in the movie or something because we wanted that feeling in it. But that's not a lot of indies are like there are two people in a room talking. We did that, but with 20 different places where they were talking. So like and on a limited budget, it's just me, Mike, and our DP driving around LA for weeks and weeks leading up to it, going to different places and saying like, hey, we can offer a couple $100, we can put you in the movie, but we can't pay what like a Netflix show is going to pay or what a normal studio film is going to pay. And in LA, they're constantly shooting things everywhere, so it was so much of that, piecing that together, and then sort of hoping that house of cards holds for the 2 weeks that we're shooting, that each location is able to like come through, as Mike's saying with the coffee shop, so we ended up being very lucky, but that was definitely something where we were putting ourselves in a corner. But ultimately, I think because you got to go shoot on location everywhere, it sort of adds an extra texture and authenticity to the movie as well.
Yeah. Anytime we walked into a coffee shop and they were like, hey, here's our sheet of rates, we were like, all right, bye.
Right.
We ain't doing it. We can't. We just can't do whatever you want to do. That's not in our cards.
Right. Yeah, and I think it comes through. You start out with like this group of people, and then as you're peeling off one by one in the different scenes, you're getting a different flavor of life in LA, but also life for this specific age group at the specific time, and you're in different locations. So it really helps kind of, the movie starts a little localized, and then it spreads out, and you get room to breathe with all the characters, and then we come back together. It's good. There's a good arc there. We really appreciated the movie and your time, obviously.
I know. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys very much.
I mean, it's great
guys,
chatting about it. Yeah, thank you. This is awesome.
Yeah, is there anything, besides month to month, is there anything you guys want to plug? What are we working on next, if you want to share?
Yeah, so this is my main thing right now, pushing this out, getting ready for like another project, but nothing too eminent. But yeah, I've this movie and Friends from Home, which is the feature I made before this with Joe Blank, which was another project I made with somebody else, co-created with, and that's in festivals now and wrapping up, and shortly will be streaming online. But you can find out more about that movie at the Friends from Home Instagram, which is just Friends from Home Movie, and then our Instagram for month to month, which is month to month movie, right, Derek?
Yep, at month to month movie. And I similar with Mike, this is the main focus right now. I have a featured documentary that's in development right now, but details are still kind of wrapped on that as everything is coming together. But that's sort of fingers crossed next project there. But I think both of us just very excited to get month to month out there and get it at more festivals and put it out in the world. So that's our main focus right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll link everything in our show notes. And thank you so much, guys. This was great.
Cool. Yeah, and guys, thank you for watching it.
Yeah, really, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
We
Hey, of course.
I mean, sometimes we show the movie to some folks, and they like it or don't like it, and nothing against people, but some people when they see a movie, they're like, "Oh, that was good," and that's at the end, that's sort of their note, and that's how they view stuff, and that's awesome.
Yeah,
but we really appreciate the
feedback is
thoughtful
nice.
questions. Yeah, it's been so awesome talking about it.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks again to Derek and Mike. Be sure to add month to month to your watch list and watch it as soon as you can. Remember, find your creative people, help them make stuff, and ask them to help you make stuff. and stop wishing you could be a filmmaker. Make a film, and you'll be one. Please give us a rating and a review wherever you're listening. It really helps the show in a lot of ways. Also, please consider supporting our show at patreon.com/moviefriendspodcast. We have a ton of bonus episodes to listen to. You get to vote on new episodes and monthly themes, and you get to support a small independent show. You can also send us an email at moviefriendspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, have a good one.
Movie Friends is produced by Seth Vargas and Michelle Rubenstein. Music by Anthony Vicora. If you like the show, please subscribe and give us a rating. It really helps us find new friends. Thanks!